Hello. So yeah, I'm Jonathan Whiting. I make games. I make games kind of like this. I make games like this, if it actually starts doing it. I make games like this. I made a game like this. And sometimes I make games like this. But I'm not really talking about any of these games today. I'm talking about a game I made in the latter end of last year, a game called Knossu. Although I'm not going to talk so much about what that game is, and more about the creative process that led to it being made. And for me, that creative process is kind of mixed up with code, and mixed up with art, and mixed up with level design. So I'm going to be talking about all of those things too. So yeah, let's jump right into it. Like Knossu came from a combination of two ideas. The first idea was developer JP LeBreton introduced me to something called game tourism, which is playing potentially like a classic video game, but with the enemies all disabled. So you're walking around in a space, and you're like experiencing these otherworldly places, which are otherworldly partly because that's how they're designed to be. They're not designed to be real life places, but also partly because the technological requirements of the time meant that you can't do like big, expansive, realistic things. So you get these quite weird places with colored lighting and like high contrast. Don't need sound right now. Yeah. So he introduced me via a set of streams of him playing Unreal. This isn't Unreal, it's Craequ, but the same theory applies. It's kind of being in a place and experiencing it. The other half of the inspiration that kind of Knossu was born from was from my frustration with how difficult it is to make 3D worlds. So I can make 2D worlds like this really easily. Like this is, I can just like paint in tiles and like add things, and then I can flip and start playing that game immediately with no like delay or hesitation. And that just doesn't really exist for 3D worlds in the same way. If you're making 3D worlds, you need to use like these very well-made but very complicated editors. And there's often like this processing phase where you switch from I am making the level, and then I kind of render the level out, and then I can load it into a game, and then I can start playing it. And that process can take like 3 minutes, 4 minutes, instead of just like a split second of hitting a button and suddenly you're doing it. So I really wanted a way of making 3D spaces as easily as I could make 2D spaces. And so yeah, I ended up stopping working on what is this game in the background, and let's minimize that. And I started working on what started out as a really terrible Wolfenstein-style engine. So this is how it was to start with. I have a room. You can kind of make everything go horrendous by walking into it. And there's a texture, and that's it. But this texture was something that kind of stayed with the game the whole way through. This is a texture inspired by Craequ, the game I was just showing. So yeah, I was making this, and I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like, hey, I should try this. And kept on plugging away at it, add some walls, add a shader that makes things in the distance go darker and give it some like 3D space. And like I'm convinced that there's something here because like it's going to be really easy to make levels this way, but also there's nothing interesting about this at all. So I really wasn't sure what I was doing, and like if there's anything to take away from this, it's that you really shouldn't stop yourself. You shouldn't stop not knowing what you're doing stop you from actually making something, because you should just start making things. because that definitely leads to more interesting results than kind of trying to carefully pre-plan everything. So moving on. What is that? Oh. Exit, okay. Oh, yes, that's fine. So yeah, I added some like ceilings, floors and ceilings and stuff. But the interesting thing about this build is not so much having variable heights and ceilings. It's that this is the first build where kind of the aesthetic of the game is distinct. So I changed my range shader to one that kind of blurs out into yellow. And like the low resolution and these hypersaturated textures make everything kind of squirm in this way that I find kind of delightful. So yeah, like I really like how these like ceiling tiles just kind of squirm away. And it's at this point where I'm kind of going, yeah, like this feels like something I could make something in. Maybe this isn't just like a tiny side project that's going to become nothing. Maybe this will actually become a game. So I start playing around a bit more, and I start thinking, so yeah, this is a raycasting engine, so it's not like rasterization style 3D, which is what most games are nowadays. Instead of being like this super polygons that I send to a graphics card and that kind of just figures everything out and renders it all. Instead, I'm in a 2D world firing out a load of lines, and at each line I go, okay, how far away is the nearest wall? And by looking at how far away the nearest wall is, I can work out how much of the screen should be like ceiling and how much of it should be wall and how much of it should be floor. So this is the way that 3D games back in like the Doom era, the Wolfenstein era, they were all done using raycasting rather than rasterization. So I'm using it here because it feels like, as no one does this anymore, there maybe are interesting things that you can do with it nowadays. Nice. That's really not consistent. So yeah, then because what I really wanted to achieve was to be able to make 3D worlds more easily, I started working on having level editing built into the engine. So I can just draw some walls, and then there's some walls. Or I can change the height of a floor, and then the height of a floor is changed. Or likewise, I can just draw in some ceiling. Why is that not working? Okay. So yeah, like just change the height of the ceiling like that. So already I can make these instant changes that are immediately reflected in the world itself. And I start trying to actually make a world with them. And this is the first world that I kind of ended up creating. There's these very blocky structures, but there's kind of a grand hallway, and you can walk into another space. And I added some colored lighting because color lighting is kind of amazing, and no one uses this ultra-saturated color lighting anymore. It just kind of washes everything out. And I added a skybox, which is broken, but I like the way it's broken, so I kept it. Yeah, you can be in these spaces, and like there it is in the editor mode, and I can just muck around and make things walls when they weren't walls, and I can change the textures from this mode and just like make the ceiling not sky and that sort of thing. So it's really easy for me to just like be in this world and start making things. The one thing that I did really feel at this stage was it feels very kind of, nowadays anything that's 3D and blocky in this way ends up being haunted by Minecraft a bit. Like everything feels like Minecraft nowadays when it's like this. So I wanted to do something that would get away from that a little bit. And I started thinking about things that you can do in a raycasting engine easily that you can't do in a rasterization engine as easily. And the first idea that I tried that I kind of liked was playing around with circles. So circles in a rasterization engine, you end up having to render like lots of little polygons and strips all over the place. And that's kind of expensive and also kind of difficult to set up, whereas rendering circles in a raycasting engine is very easy. You just do a detection between the line that you're casting and a circle instead of the line you're casting and a square, which is a different bit of maths, but a fairly easy bit of maths. And then suddenly you can have these very smooth circles that way more smooth than the resolution of this game is able to show. And you get these nice sort of blocked out bits and buttresses and those sort of things suddenly by being able to do these curves. And suddenly it doesn't look like Minecraft anymore, which is great. And this put me on mind of other things I could do that are easy in raycasting engines and difficult in rasterization engines. And it's this step that kind of gave this game its real flavor. So I kind of figured, hey, this space is interesting and it feels kind of claustrophobic, and it'd be nice to have something where the space is the interesting part of the game, which kind of comes back to this game tourism thing, is how can I make being in an interesting place interesting? And I hit on the idea of using portals everywhere. So in some ways, these portals are very much like portals in Portal. They are links to other parts of the world, but unlike in Portal, they're not signaled as this is a place where space changes. So you see these blue doorways. That's a portal that will go somewhere else in the level. So right now it's going there, but it could go somewhere different. And you can't really tell from the entrance that you're walking through something. So it ends up being possible to have worlds which are interconnected in extremely weird ways as you go through a space and then come back out into that same space and things like that. And this felt really, really productive. It felt like you can make a world that is very interesting to be in, where you turn a corner and you're back where you were before you turn that corner, and that sort of thing. It felt like already I had a space that was interesting to be in. You'll never get this exact same map. You'll just get the same map built of different pieces. So yeah, that was that level. And the idea in each of these levels was that there'd be one of these white pickups, which is the thing that you're going to need to collect, and then you're going to have to escape back from the level and get return to where you came from. So yeah, that's that. Then the thing that came next was adding. Oh, whoops. Bear with me. Adding this Hog World, which is this location to tie several levels together. I knew I was going to need some sort of introduction because I definitely wasn't interested in spelling out how this world works explicitly. I don't think that tutorials are very good in general, and in particular in this game where a large part of the experience comes from being in a bewildering place. It felt like telling people how that space works would be completely counter to the goal of the game. So I ended up putting space for an intro level there, and then you walk out into this hub, and going through here, a palette changes to make it clear that you're going to a different space, and this is the space that I first showed. If I go back out into the hub, and I don't get caught by that thing, there is this open world that I showed afterwards, and I also have this new third level, which is based on kind of Greek labyrinths in some ways. You have these kind of endless, twisty, skinny corridors that seem like an interesting concept to try, but in reality, walking through endless corridors is not a very fun thing to do. It gets very tiresome very quickly. So I ended up ditching this level entirely and just using the other levels. I wish I could find the start of this again. I'm lost. Nope. I really am lost. Is that? Oh, so the one thing that I did like from that level is the entranceway to that level. You see the pickup from a distance, and then you have to navigate the level to go and find it. So I ended up replacing that level with another level that used that same technique. It was definitely worth just binning that level entirely. It was definitely not a good thing. So this is now the game in its almost final state. Where like this area is the introduction to the game. So you start in this corridor looking out, and like this is where I had to do in some ways the heavy lifting design-wise in this game, because I need to teach the idea that there's portals, and I need to teach the idea that you need to pick up this pickup and bring it back outside of a level. But I have to do, like I decided I had to do all of this without like any writing or any like explanation. So to achieve that, like you wander through some space and you're in a world. This section exists entirely just as a callback, so that later on in the level you'll realize you're already there. You come out and see this big structure that doesn't make any sense, and this is clearly like a dead end, apart from aha, it's not a dead end, it goes somewhere different. You go in here, and there's nothing you can really do apart from eventually wander up and like enter the pickup. And then you come back down, and the world has changed underneath you. Now you can go back out of this gate here, and go through here, and that goes up there now. So clearly this space is both impossible and also very unlike any real space. I'm not too worried about people understanding the specifics of what's going on here, just understanding that things are strange. And you can now have access to this section, which is the upper floor of the place you just were. And eventually you walk back through and hopefully realize that like the entrance to this level is now the exit to this level. You walk through here, the pickup that you took flies back to the middle of this hub, and there's 3 other spaces, so there's 3 spaces for other things to go. So yeah, like that feels like a reasonable place to be. It sort of feels like I've hopefully taught enough about how the pickups work by now that they'll be able to figure them out within the main level. The other thing I should talk about at this point is how important music is to this game. So my brother does lots of music stuff. He does music for almost any of my games, which are sort of solo projects, and have music that isn't like completely dire, have music but done by him. This is under his alias Bo Church. He has too many aliases. And I wanted the audio in this game to be very positional, to kind of emphasize the fact that you're in a world, you're in a space. So as you move through, like different loops come in and fade out to try and give you this sense that you're in somewhere that's full of music, full of sound. Say if I go in here, then some drums start kicking in. So having this sort of soundscape ends up being very important to how the game feels as a space. It really can't be underestimated how important sound ends up being to this. It makes the monster feel threatening, it makes the pickup feel alluring, and it makes the spaces you're traveling through feel lived in some way. So I had a few like important design problems left to solve. The most important one was what should happen if a monster ever does actually catch you. So for ages in this game, if a monster gets you, your screen goes kind of white, it gets flooded in, and then it goes away again, and you're completely fine. And that didn't really feel acceptable. For it to feel threatening, there has to be some credibility to its threat. Yeah, it got me there. So what I ended up doing was it like takes you away, it returns you to the start of the level, and it re-randomizes the levels that you're traveling through. So everything you've learnt in your previous foray into this stage now doesn't really mean anything, because everything's now connected in an entirely different way, and you can get lost entirely afresh. So yeah, that felt like a reasonable solution. At some point, I was thinking maybe when you take the pickup, that should change everything, because that fits nicely with what the intro does. But that ultimately didn't feel like a very good idea, because navigating back out of a level that you've navigated through is one of the most interesting things you can try and do in this game, because the spaces are so complicated and interweaved. Like trying to backtrack is actually extremely difficult. The final thing, like the final difficult design thing that I had to deal with, was what to do when you found a pickup in each of these 4 levels and returned them. I don't know if I'm going to be able to easily show that though, because I need to find too many things. But so yeah, what ends up happening in the end is these like 4 pillars come together, and they rotate and they drag you in, and the screen goes white. And originally I was intending that like the monster would come back and it would eat you one last time, but that felt kind of harsh, given how much of the rest of this game is kind of brutalistic. It felt like ending on a slightly more ambiguous note would be good. So I end up just returning players straight back to the beginning of the game, which often feels like kind of a cheap trick, but in this game it makes quite a lot of sense, because like the architecture of the levels is so much about leaving a space and then coming back into it. It makes sense to me that this game is a game that's about entering a space, doing something, and being forced right back into the beginning of the state, like everything reset. Yeah, that was more or less how this game ended up finishing. The last thing that I had to pick was a name. I always end up leaving that too late. So Knossu is kind of clearly a take on the name Nos, which is the name that this game had, which is sort of based on Knossos, which has ties to like Greek labyrinth legends, and that sort of seems to fit together. The only problem with a name like Knossu is it has the same problem that so many of my games names have, which is I'm never really sure exactly how I'm meant to pronounce them. But yeah, that's just a problem that I have. So yeah, like that's more or less all I think I have to say. That's Knossu. Yeah, cool. Yeah.